Okay, so I'm going to provide you, it's hard to follow Leah, but this is not my first time following Leah, but I'll do my best. Be careful, you have to be joyful and hopeful no matter who you're following. So anyway, my presentation is going to give you more of an update about what's going on, and you would have noticed this week in the news that the federal government announced that they're going to be delaying the implementation of euthanasia for mental illness until March of 2027. Now, it hasn't happened yet. The legislation's been proposed. It still has to get through the Senate. I'm not someone who says it won't happen, but I'm recognizing there's realities to all these things in the world, and I'm hoping that everything does happen. It's not enough, though, to delay a crazy decision like allowing euthanasia for mental illness. It shouldn't be even considered in the first place, but nonetheless, this is where we're at. You may also realize that in February of 2023, we had a parliamentary committee report, the Medical Aid in Dying Committee, that select committee of our parliament, which had come out with a report saying that we should legalize euthanasia for children. Mature minors, they called it. I'm not going to get into exactly all the thing about what a mature minor is, but I will say to you that Canada's MAID program, our euthanasia program, has gone mad. And I've got a pamphlet on my table that says exactly that and explains the situation. And I think mad is probably the right word. But I think this is the big issue right here, and Leah has certainly covered it well. And actually, John Wyatt gave a fabulous presentation. But the question is, why do people ask for euthanasia? And I think this is fundamental to how we react to this, because we recognize that we're human beings. Okay? We recognize that we are a fallen creature. There are some radical autonomists out there, and they are demanding their right to die. There's some of those like that, absolutely. These are the ones you might see in the odd newspaper article too, because they're setting it up to create this supposed right to die. But nonetheless, most people die by euthanasia not because they're radical autonomists, but because they are going through a very difficult health condition. Absolutely. They're feeling depressed. They're feeling lonely. They are experiencing feelings of hopelessness. And they believe their life has lost purpose, meaning, value. This is why they're asking for it. So obviously speaking, they would be qualifying for it based on their medical condition, their irremediable medical condition, whatever that actually means. But in fact, they're asking for it because they feel their life has lost meaning, purpose, or value. Well, we're all human beings, and all of us at times in our life will go through those feelings. That's why euthanasia threatens all of our lives. It's not just something for those radical secularists to take advantage of, sadly. It's something that affects all of our lives. Euthanasia is not about freedom. They talk about freedom, choice, and autonomy. It's about abandonment. That's what it's about. We're abandoning people to their death. So I'll give you the latest data. I just received it yesterday. The Ontario Office of the Chief Coroner of Ontario reported that there have been 18,373 euthanasia deaths assisted deaths in Ontario since legalization till December 31st of 2023. There have been 4,641 last year and 3,934 in 2022. That was an 18% increase in Ontario last year, which is actually a little bit slower of an increase than previous years, but I do predict, nationally speaking, Canada will have a higher than an 18% increase because of the Quebec, British Columbia, etc. factors. Since legalization, though, just so you know, and I'm not going to get too heavily into this, but you should know the data, there was 18,370 euthanasia deaths, 3 assisted suicide deaths. So what's the difference? In Canada, we legalized euthanasia by creating an exception to homicide in the criminal code. So when I say it's murder and the other side says, no, it's medical aid in dying, in fact, even the criminal code recognizes it as an exception to murder. That's what it is, okay? It is murder. Assisted suicide is something that's very similar, and both are legal in Canada. In the case of euthanasia, the doctor or the nurse would then inject you, or through putting it through, what do you call it when they hook you up? Anyway, the point of it is, yeah, that's right, or through an IV, they're going to then be killing you with a lethal concoction of poison drugs. Whereas assisted suicide, they give you the prescription for those same drugs, and you have to take it yourself. Usually it would be taken then by drinking it down. But almost none of them are assisted suicide deaths. They're almost all euthanasia. Euthanasia is murder. They can say whatever they want. They can dress it up. They can call it whatever they want. That's what it is. In 2022, the data showed that we were up to 13,241. Okay, I just told you the Ontario data. I'm predicting that we were almost 16,000 deaths in 2023. If you do the math between what happened in Ontario and the fact that Quebec's been going faster than us, and on British Columbia and a few other provinces it's increasing at faster rates, sadly. I would say we're probably pretty close to 16,000 in 2023. And that would mean that Quebec had the highest rate in the world in 2022 with 6.6% of all deaths. So, here's the thing. I like to remind people that when we were debating this issue in 2015, 2016, members of Parliament would tell us, well, we're not going to be like the Netherlands or Belgium. Now, what am I saying? The Netherlands and Belgium both legalized euthanasia around 2002. And there were stories out of the Netherlands and Belgium of issues that you would say, well, that seems pretty crazy. Like, how could they have done that, right? And so, therefore, they were saying, well, that's not going to happen in Canada. Sadly, Canada is surpassing them. Sadly. It's a very sad reality. I was just in Slovenia speaking. I just flew back from Slovenia. Slovenia is debating euthanasia. And it's a very similar bill to the Canadian bill, actually. And they brought me in to do what? To talk about what's happening in Canada. Because, of course, people in Slovenia are being told, oh, this would not be too bad of a problem. It's going to be only for those few cases. And, of course, nobody wants to suffer, do they? Nobody wants to suffer. Anyway, let me tell you a few stories. Some of them I'm going to go through fairly quickly. The big thing about this story was Candace Lewis in August of 2016. She was 25. She was born with multiple disabilities. And she was very sick at that time. The key to this story is it's August of 2016. We legalized in June of 2016. So you're only talking about a few months after legalization. And her doctor was pressuring them for euthanasia. So you have to think of how quickly this starts becoming accepted by some people as Candace being better off dead. We can help you die, right? The pressure. The doctor told her mother when they said they weren't interested that she was selfish. And the doctor challenged Candace by saying, do you know how sick you are? The story of Candace is very interesting because her mother was basically being told, Candace is dying. And so Sheila, her mother, said, well, if Candace is dying then we're going to take her home. She should die at home. So they took Candace home. And this picture was taken, about a year and a half after that point. So I'm not saying people who go home don't die. I'm saying in this case, Candace not only didn't die, she actually recovered. She was in her sister's wedding party the year later. But the point of it is this was a doctor in August of 2016 pressuring them to euthanasia. And of course, if she had died by euthanasia, she would have been dead, right? You don't come back from death. Well, you might in another way, but you don't come back from death. You might remember this story. Last year, the 23-year-old man in Ontario who had... he was a type 2 diabetic, so he was insulin-dependent diabetic, actually. And he was approved for euthanasia at the Maid House, the euthanasia clinic in Toronto. And his mother was shocked by the fact that her son, who was diabetic, who was actually fairly stable at this point. So what had happened to her son, his name is Keanu, during COVID, he became very depressed and he stopped taking insulin. So he did have serious health serious health things. He had health issues because of that. Nonetheless, the fact of it is he was reasonably stable at this point. And I hit that button. If you can get it back to full screen. If not, I guess we go on. Anyway, I didn't mean to do that. There it goes. So what happened is that she created such a huge issue in the media that, in fact, the doctor refused to kill Keanu. And he's still alive today because she had made such a deal about it, there was no doctor actually willing to kill her son. So here's the point. She could have said, Keanu, please don't do this. She could have been a caring mother, but she actually went beyond that and said, I'm going to prevent this. I'm going to do everything in my possible ability to prevent this. Amir Farsu is another case. He's a man in St. Catharines who was told by the person who owned the building he lived in that they were going to repair and change his apartment and everything. I believe it was a new owner, and they told him he had to leave. And he was a man with a disability on a disability pension, a disability payment. And he said, he looked around. There was no apartment he could afford to live in. So he was facing homelessness. So he applied for euthanasia, not based on wanting to die, but because he was in fear of homelessness. And of course, with his disability, he had an irremediable medical condition. Therefore, he was capable of being approved for euthanasia. I should actually say this to you and jump back a bit. I've adjusted these slides to make them shorter because I knew I had about a half hour. But in Canada, we legalized euthanasia in 2016. We amended that law in 2021. What we did in 2021 is we did several things. We removed the part of the law that said that your natural death had to be reasonably foreseeable. That was the quote, quote, terminal illness part of the law. Now, they never actually defined that your natural death had to be reasonably foreseeable in the first place, so it was always confusing anyway. Nonetheless, they removed that. By removing that, that really changed things significantly, because what it meant then at that point is that you needed to have what they would call it like an irremediable medical condition. And the problem with that is, how do you define these things? So what it essentially has come out to mean to most of the pro-euthanasia doctors is if you have a chronic condition that is not going to get better, and actually most chronic conditions in some way tend to deteriorate over time also. So they would call that an irremediable medical condition. So when that happened in 2021, or when we were debating that in 2021, the disability community came out and said, well, you're actually passing a law that specifically is oriented towards killing us. And of course, they were right. They were right. That's exactly the end result of that. So what we have is people like Amir Farsu, who's actually living in poverty. He's a man with a disability, but he's actually living in poverty. He's actually asking for euthanasia not because he wants to die, but because he's in fear of homelessness. But in fact, he would be approved for euthanasia based on his disability. The other thing we did in 2021 is we extended euthanasia to people with mental illness alone. But then they put a 2-year moratorium on that because they said we weren't ready to kill these people yet. And then last year we put another 1-year extension to that moratorium, and now we're talking about March of 2027. All of this is, in my opinion, I'm opposed to killing people. I don't know about you. Okay, I'm opposed to killing people. I think it's a crazy idea to be killing people. I think euthanasia, if you start thinking this through, is pretty an insane concept if you think about what it's all about. But if you're talking about euthanasia for people with mental illness, it's the insanity of the insanity. What about the Veterans Affairs worker advocated for a Canadian soldier with PTSD to have euthanasia? Think about that. You have someone who served our country in Afghanistan who's experiencing PTSD, needing help for their condition, and they contact Veterans Affairs for, obviously, hope to maybe see psychiatric care or counseling help with their situation, and the person's being told, have you considered medical aid in dying, euthanasia? This person was so upset by that, they ended up going to the U.S. for treatment. That's a small fact that a lot of people don't realize. But, when that story came out, our Veterans Affairs Minister, Lawrence MacAulay, who for the most part is actually a fairly nice guy, but he's from PEI. PEI's got fairly nice people in it. Anyway, the point of it is that he had said, it was just a bad case. It was just a one-off. That's what he said in his press conference after that case came out. It was just a worker who made a mistake. We don't do that. But of course, by saying that, other cases came out. We then learned that there was at least 6. There might have been many more, but we found out there was at least 6 cases of this, and at least 2 who had died by euthanasia. Then they thought it was settling down, and then the story of Christine Gauthier came out. So Christine is a woman who was a veteran in our country. She became disabled serving her country. She became a Paralympian, and now she was seeking a wheelchair lift for her home. Now that's not unreasonable if you consider she served our country. She's seeking a wheelchair lift, and they had said to her, now remember, she's agitating Veterans Affairs because they're saying no to her. We're not going to give you a wheelchair lift. And she's agitating them, saying, but I qualify for it, and she does. They said, madam, if you're really so desperate, we can give you medical assistance in dying. Now think about this. Now, is this just a rogue employee, or is this a culture shift? Think about that. I think it's a culture shift. That's what I think this is about. The fact of it is that Christine Gauthier, these kind of stories have upset the government a lot. And it's actually these stories that led to that first delay and euthanasia for mental illness. Let's not be innocent about this. The government wasn't actually saying in 2022, when they announced that they're going to delay euthanasia for mental illness until March of 2024, they weren't saying that they weren't ready. What they were saying is, we've got a lot of political heat right now, and we want to turn down the heat in the kitchen. That's what they were saying. The family of Joan Rowaway. This is a story that's not well known, but it's out of British Columbia. Joan had cancer, and she was dying. Her doctor explained that there was no further treatment that could help her. Now, that's not an issue. That's a reality, that there's a time when the treatment is not really going to provide you a benefit, and you are coming to an end. Now, hopefully, that doesn't happen in that way to most people, but this is what was happening to Joan. And then the concept of MAID came up in the conversation. Joan was insistent that she never asked for MAID, euthanasia, but the oncologist during that conversation had approved her. So she was unaware that she was approved for MAID, for euthanasia. And obviously she was terminally ill, so this wasn't too controversial a case, right? This isn't like, oh, she's going through mental illness. No, she was nearing death. So here the picture is here. Joan is living with her daughter and son-in-law at their home because she's dying at home. They're caring for her as she dies at home. I believe actually that's the better way of doing things when we can. Anyway, they get a call from Fraser Health, which is the healthcare authority. We've scheduled your mother's MAID, and we're coming to pick her up. And they said, our mother has not asked for MAID. And they said, you're denying her right to die. And they sent 2 people over to come pick her up. And of course, they refused to let them in the house. So then the Fraser Health Authority was smart enough to send someone over who's a little bit more conciliatory, who actually went over there and asked Joan, did you want MAID? And she said, no. Now think this through. These are people of faith who are caring for their mother who's dying at home, and someone calls them up saying, we're coming to get your mother. You can't make this up, actually. Okay, you can't make these stories up. Alan Nichols. Why is this story so important about Alan Nichols? He died at the Chilliwack Hospital in July, it was actually August he died. He went to the Chilliwack Hospital in July of 2019 because he was experiencing suicidal ideation, but that was not new for Alan. Alan had gone through a lot of suicidal ideation in his life. So therefore, this was not the first time he was seeking death, but at this point, when he was seeking death, they took that as a request for medical aid in dying, and they approved him for death. He didn't have any other medical condition, even though his death certificate had a lie on it to actually say that he did have another medical condition, and he was approved. The family found out 3 days before he died that he was going to die, and they begged the doctors. They said, you have to reevaluate Alan. The fact of it is Alan has been through this many times before. This is not new for Alan. He needs time, and he will be better. Instead, they said, no, he's been approved, and they killed him. They killed him. This is a picture the night before he died. Alan here with his brother, and they were absolutely distraught by the fact that Alan had died this way. On top of it, the authorities have denied any information to the family, which is really upsetting because they say it's privacy. So the brother, who was his power of attorney for health care, he just basically, after Alan died, then he wanted to know how was this approved, and they've denied him any of those medical records, even though he would legally have the right to the medical records of his brother. In June of 2023, you might have heard of this story. Remember, we've not legalized euthanasia for mental illness yet. Catherine Mentler goes to the Vancouver General Hospital because she's experiencing suicidal ideation. In the case of Catherine, this was also not a new experience. She knew that she had a problem, and she was seeking help. What they told her at Vancouver General Hospital is, well, sorry, Catherine, we don't have a bed for you. We can't admit you. Okay. Then they said, and you can't see a psychiatrist till November. Well, this is June. You can't see a psychiatrist till November. And then they asked her if she thought about medical-assisted suicide. Now think about this. Now, this is, once again, I think, what you call culture shift that's gone on in our country. There's no other way to explain this, because this is pretty crass if you think about it. Somebody who's seeking help because they're experiencing suicidal ideation is being told, have you thought about medical assistance in dying, when you're speaking to the counselor? The counselor says that to you. And there's more to this story, but it shows you where our country is going. Okay? Euthanasia for mental illness, well, it creates a question around killing someone who is treatable or who has questionable ability to consent. And I think this is essentially the issue. So Dr. Gain has testified to the government. Dr. Sonia Gain has said that it's impossible to predict whether mental illness conditions are irremediable. Dr. Sonia Gain is a professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto, and he's been a leader in the Canadian Psychiatric Association for many years. And I think that's exactly the point. This is what we're talking about doing. So I think that the government, it's good that the government has gone this step to say that we're going to delay euthanasia for mental illness or pause it until March of 2027. I think it shouldn't be done at all, ever. And I think that has to be our point of view. And we have to push very hard to make that a reality. In fact, what's going on in our country has to be rolled back. And I think that the Honorable Ed Fast, last year he introduced Bill C-314. That bill actually was to reverse the law, which would have then prevented euthanasia for mental illness. That bill was defeated in Parliament by 167 to 150, but you'll notice here that 8 Liberals voted to support C-314. So you actually see this sort of, how would you say, this breakage in that Liberal stronghold starting. And I think that what Ed Fast did with this bill created where we're going today, which is actually the government finding it very hard to actually allow euthanasia for mental illness. So I have to thank him for what he did. Okay, so let's move on. I mentioned about mature minors. Okay, we're going to go on. Euthanasia is sold to the culture. It's been sold to the culture under this whole idea of enabling personal autonomy and choice. My body, my choice. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, my body, my choice. We're told that it's all about people who are suffering and nearing death. The data actually shows that's not true, but that's what we're told it's about. You know, they brainwashed us with the concept of accepting euthanasia by telling us story after story after story of someone who was suffering and needed and was demanding euthanasia, so it got into our psyche that that is the only answer. They tried to convince us that it's either euthanasia or death by suffering. Those were your two choices. There wasn't a third choice. That was it. We're told that it's not a form of suicide because a person rationally chooses to die. All of these points are either philosophically wrong or simply usually not the case. This is about a lie. You know how the big lie works? If you say the lie enough, people believe it to be true. The culture of abandonment, this is what we're living in. It's the culture of abandonment that's created euthanasia. And this can be changed by a caring culture. So it's incredibly important what we believe and what we say. It's also more important by what we do. What we do is the greatest thing we can do to affect the world. It is essential that people who feel that their life lacks value, purpose, or feel that no one cares about them, that they're offered purpose. They're offered support and genuine hope. I get calls all the time, just so you know, I get calls all the time from people who have been approved by euthanasia, considering euthanasia, or family members, because we have this helpline. I got a card on my table. You can grab it. It's got the helpline number on it. And you can share it with people, because that's exactly why we get the calls. Someone who's a supporter of ours will say to them, well, why don't you call this number? So we get these calls all the time. And, you know, these people are lonely. They feel that their life lacks meaning, purpose, or value. And later, during the question session, if you ask me a question, I'll tell you another story. The answer is to care for others, to journey with them at their difficult times of life. You need to be the face of Christ in their life. That's what you need to be. We can change the world one person at a time by caring for them. You know, when you say to someone, your life is important to me. Someone has been approved for euthanasia. If you're a friend of theirs, and I mean a true friend of theirs, they might be open to you. I don't know if they're open to me because I'm just this euthanasia guy, but I mean the point of it is they might be open to you. You need to tell them how important they are in your life, why their life is important. If they can open up, then we can love them into living until they die. Euthanasia threatens my life. Why? Because I'm a human being. I'm not God. I'm a human being. We all experience these feelings, you know. We all go through serious illness. We all go through personal difficulties. We all go through loneliness, some to different degrees than others, right? Some people are very much affected by this in a very, psychological way. We all fear for the future. Every one of us do. We also question our purpose for living. You know, you could say, oh, I'm a person of faith. I don't do that. Well, yes, you're a human being. You do that, right? We experience existential distress, situational depression. We all at times lose hope. It's our human nature, whether we like it or not, and it's all to a different varying degree. Suffering alone is very difficult for a human being to do, and we have a lot of people in this culture who are suffering alone. We need to do something about that as people who care about others. Loneliness, isolation, depression, loss of hope, these are all leading purposes and reasons why people are asking to have their life ended. Why do people ask for euthanasia? Well, I already said to you, most of these people, they're asking for euthanasia because they're going through a difficult health condition. I'm not questioning that. They feel depressed, lonely. They're experiencing hopelessness. They believe that their life has lost meaning, purpose, or value. So their health condition might be the reason they're being approved. Often it's that whole existential issue, that whole personal feelings of, I don't want to be a burden on others, or what is my purpose for living anyway, that is causing them to want to be killed. Okay? Euthanasia is not about freedom, it's about abandonment. I call them deaths of despair. That's very similar to what Leah was saying about people who go through suicidal ideation. Like the Netherlands and Belgium, Canada is in a very serious place in the world. I'm blocking my slides for you guys. Oh, you get to see it over there too, sorry. Okay, here's the point. We're talking about euthanasia for children. We're talking about expanding this to incompetent people. We're talking about this by advanced request. We're talking about people with Alzheimer's and dementia. You know, we're hearing in the culture all this talk about, isn't it terrible these people are suffering by Alzheimer's or dementia? You know, what are they saying? They're saying their lives are better off dead. That's where we're talking about. This is the movement we're going to. We're talking about people with mental illness. Technically, it's legal. It's not in place, right? They're holding it off and putting it in place. There's only one clear line in the sand, and that is prohibition of killing. And we've crossed that. So when we crossed the line, people said, oh, well, you know, Alex, there'll just be a little bit of killing. That's what they said. Larry remembers. It's just going to be a little bit. It's not going to be a lot. It's only going to be for those few cases, you know, and people like me must be heartless because we were saying no. Oh, we must be heartless, right? But the reality is once killing is an acceptable solution to human problems, the only question remaining is who can we kill and for what reasons? That's what we're going through. And the problem is as human beings, there's lots of reasons someone might want to die. Like this is not just, oh, we can just, you know, put a box over this and everything outside of the box will be you can't, but only in that box we're going to allow it. Well, you see, let me give you a little insight now. Why did we expand this so quickly in Canada? Well, first of all, the road was paved somewhere else first. It was paved already in the Netherlands and Belgium, so it was quick to catch up. But secondly, we have this attitude in our country of equality and discrimination being so wrong. So why did we have to extend euthanasia to people who weren't terminally ill? Because it was discrimination not to allow them to have euthanasia. That's what the courts were saying, essentially. If you go down to, oh, yes, they had nice words around it and everything, but I mean, actually, that decision in Quebec wasn't around nice words, that court decision. But anyway, the fact of it is they did sort of doll it up a bit, but the fact of it is it was about discrimination. It's discrimination to allow someone who's terminally ill to have euthanasia, but someone who's suffering and is not terminally ill, they should have it too then. Why are they talking about this for mature minors? I should actually tell you now what a mature minor is. A mature minor is not based on an age. It's based on an assessment. So in Ontario, a doctor would have to do an assessment and determine whether that child, whether they be 15, 14, or 17, whatever it might be, is capable of consenting, right? That's what you're talking about, an assessment, okay? So why are we talking about mature minors? Well, it's discrimination not to allow a mature minor to have euthanasia if an 18-year-old can have it. What about mental illness? Same thing. It's all about equality. So equality is killing us, okay? We have this weird idea, and then they call it's a charter right. No, there's no charter right to euthanasia. I read the Carter decision. They did not actually say it was a charter right. It was never said, okay? I know that the euthanasia lobby wants you to think that. So this is my contact information. You can contact me at Facebook, Twitter. I have something on my table, though. I have some newsletters. I want you to take them. I have the 1-800 number for our helpline. I want you to take it. If you might need it someday, you can call us. I've got this Do Not Kill Me card. It's in both French and English. It's easier than a tattoo, the Do Not Kill Me card. Take the card. Take them off my table. And then I have these cards. I'm not 100% sure how many people are here, but for everybody here, there needs to be one of these cards in that box on my table. We've got these cards. So these go to your member of parliament, and if you don't know who that is, send it to the justice minister or the health minister, and I'll give you that name. And it says that I demand that the Canadian government reverse its decision to permit MAID for mental illness alone, meaning I'm thankful that they're backing off, but it's not enough. It's not enough, okay? They shouldn't be allowing this at all, okay? We need to be telling our members of parliament that, so everyone can come to my table. There's lots of pens there. Fill one of these out, and I'll make sure your member of parliament gets it. And I think I have run out of time, but I'll see you guys later, and God bless you.